There's a trader I think about often. He had blown 3 accounts in 18 months. Each time, the same pattern. A losing streak would begin, he'd increase his position size to make it back faster, the losses would compound, and then nothing left. On the 4th account, something changed. Not his strategy, not his broker, not his market. He had read Mark Douglas and done one thing differently. He had written 4 commitments on an index card and taped it to his monitor. The card didn't tell him how to trade, it told him how to be while trading. He hasn't blown an account since. The 4 things on that card are what this video is about. But before I tell you what was on the card, I want to make sure you understand something about why that card worked when years of experience hadn't. Because it wasn't the information on the card that saved him. He already knew most of what was on the card. He knew about position sizing. He knew about stop losses. He had heard all of the advice before. The card worked because it externalized something that his mind alone could not hold under pressure. When a losing streak begins, when cortisol is flooding your system, and your identity feels threatened, and every instinct you have is screaming at you to do something, to fix this, to get back what you lost, your rational mind goes offline. Not completely, but enough. Enough that the commitments you made calmly in the morning, when you were rested and clear-headed and fully yourself, become very difficult to access in the heat of the afternoon when everything is going wrong. The card was the morning version of him speaking directly to the afternoon version. And the afternoon version, at his lowest and most reactive, could still read. This is the insight that sits beneath all 4 habits. Blowing a trading account is almost never the result of a single catastrophic decision made in cold blood. It is the result of a cascade, a losing streak that triggers emotional arousal, that impairs judgment, that produces a bad decision that worsens the situation, that increases emotional arousal that produces a worse decision, on and on until the account is gone. And at each step in that cascade, the trader genuinely believed they were making a rational choice. The brain under threat is very good at generating plausible-sounding justifications for impulsive decisions. It tells you that increasing your position size is a calculated response to an identified opportunity. It tells you that holding the losing position past your stop is patience and conviction rather than denial and fear. It tells you stories that feel true in the moment and look absurd in hindsight. The 4 habits on the card are not clever strategies for finding better trades. They are structural interruptions to that cascade. They are designed to insert a moment of friction, a pause, a rule, a written commitment between the emotional impulse and the destructive action. And that moment of friction, small as it seems, is often the difference between a difficult week and a blown account. You don't blow a trading account because you made bad trades. You blow it because you made bad trades and then refused to accept what they were telling you. The account didn't fail you. You failed to listen. And listening, really listening, with your behavior rather than just your thoughts requires structures that can hold when your mind cannot. That is what the 4 habits are. That is why they work. Not because they're brilliant. Because they're built to function under conditions where your brilliant mind is temporarily unavailable. Now let me tell you the full story of our trader because I told you about the 4th account, but the 3rd one is what I didn't say, and it matters more than anything that came before it. The first blown account he largely shrugged off. He had heard that most traders blow their first account. He treated it as tuition, as the market charging him for his education. He was not wrong, exactly, but the lesson he drew was the wrong one. He decided the problem was his strategy, and he spent 3 months developing a new one. The second account he funded with genuine confidence. The new system was better. His analysis was sharper. He lasted 5 months before the same pattern reasserted itself, losing streak, increased position size, compounding losses, account gone. This time it stung more. He was quieter about it. He told himself the market conditions had been unusual, that the system would work in a better environment, that he just needed to be more disciplined. The third account was where the story changes. He funded the third account with money he could not afford to lose. Not dramatically, he wasn't risking the mortgage or his children's education. But it was the kind of money that, if lost, would require him to have an honest conversation with his spouse about whether this was worth continuing. He knew that when he funded it. He told himself it would make him more disciplined, that having real stakes would finally force him to follow his rules. And for 3 months, it seemed to be working. His discipline was better. He was following his rules more consistently than he ever had. And then a losing streak came longer than any he had experienced before, and the old cascade began, exactly as it always had, except that this time the money was real in a way it had never quite been before. By the time it was over, the third account was gone, And the night he closed the platform for the last time, he didn't feel the shrug of the first account or the sting of the second. He felt something much heavier and much darker. He felt like he might be someone who simply could not do this. And he felt other things that night that he has never spoken about publicly and that I am not going to describe further, except to say that I understand them. And if you're somewhere near that place right now, not just frustrated with your trading, but truly, privately, questioning more than just your account, I want you to know that the way through is not the way out. He found Mark Douglas's work the following week, almost by accident. And what he found there was not a new strategy, it was an explanation. For the first time in 3 years of trading, he read something that described exactly what had been happening to him, not just the external events, but the internal ones, the cascade, the self-deception, the impulsive decisions that felt rational in the moment, the systematic inability to execute what he knew under pressure. He felt, for the first time, that he wasn't broken. He was simply operating without the structures that would allow his better self to stay in control when conditions got hard. And so he wrote 4 things on an index card and taped it to his monitor. And that fourth account, the one he funded with money he could actually afford to lose, became the foundation of something different. Here is the first habit. It is the one he wrote at the top of the card and the one he now considers non-negotiable above all others. Before you open your platform each morning, before you look at a single chart, write down the maximum amount you are willing to lose today. Write it as a dollar amount, specific and concrete, not a percentage in your head, a number on paper. This is your hard stop for the day. When your losses reach that number, the platform closes. Not after one more trade to try to recover some of it. Not after a quick check of whether there's a really good setup happening right now. The platform closes. You are done for the day. This is not a suggestion. This is a contract between the calm, rational version of you who wrote the number this morning and the activated, cortisol-flooded version of you who will be tempted to ignore it in the afternoon. The calm version is wiser. Honor the contract. The reason this habit is first is because it is the backstop for everything else. All the other habits are about improving your behavior during the trading day. This one is about limiting the damage when your behavior fails anyway, and it will fail sometimes. Every trader's behavior fails sometimes. The question is whether the failure costs you a bad day or an account. The hard stop answers that question in advance, while you still have the clarity to answer it wisely. The mechanics of this habit are simple, but the practice is not. The practice is the honoring. Because there will be days, and you need to know this in advance, when you hit your number, and there is a setup in front of you that looks extraordinary. That looks like the best trade you've seen in weeks. Your mind will generate reasons why this particular situation justifies an exception. It will be very persuasive. And the answer, every time, without exception, is no. Not because the trade might not be a good one. It might be excellent. But because the moment you make an exception, you have not made an exception to your daily stop loss. You have abolished it. Because now it is no longer a rule, it is a suggestion that you follow until the right argument comes along to override it. And the right argument always comes along eventually, because your mind under pressure is very good at generating right arguments. The only protection against that is a rule that has no exceptions. None. Now here's the second habit, position sizing, and specifically removing your feelings from position sizing. Most traders, even experienced ones, adjust their position size based on how confident they feel about a particular trade. A setup that looks very clean, very obvious, very high probability, they size up. A setup they're less certain about, they size down. This feels like good risk management. It feels like the mature, thoughtful application of judgment. It is almost always a mistake. Here's why. Your confidence in a trade is not a reliable predictor of that trade's outcome. Your confidence is a feeling. It is influenced by recent results. You feel more confident after a winning streak and less confident after a losing one, regardless of the objective quality of the setups. It is influenced by how well the setup matches your favorite chart pattern, which may or may not correlate with actual performance. It is influenced by your emotional state, your sleep quality, the time of day, and dozens of other factors that have nothing to do with the trade's actual probability of success. When you size up based on confidence and size down based on uncertainty, you are not managing risk intelligently. You are exposing yourself to your own emotional state masquerading as analysis. The antidote is a fixed percentage. Every single trade, regardless of how you feel about it, regardless of how perfect the setup looks, regardless of recent results, 1% of account, or 0.5%. or 2%, depending on your system. But fixed, anchored, immovable. This feels wrong at first. It feels like you're leaving money on the table by not sizing up on your best setups. But here's what Mark Douglas understood, and most traders discover too late. You cannot reliably identify your best setups in advance. You can identify setups that meet your criteria. Whether any particular one will be a winner is unknowable until it resolves. Sizing up on sure things is not an expression of good judgment. It is an expression of the need to be right, the need to have your analysis validated by an outsized reward. And the need to be right is, as we've discussed, one of the most expensive habits a trader can have. There is a moment in most blown accounts, a specific, identifiable moment where the trader sized up dramatically on a trade they were very confident about. And that trade lost. And because they had sized up, the loss was large enough to trigger the emotional cascade that produced all the subsequent bad decisions. Fixed position sizing removes that moment from the equation. Not because you won't have big, confident trades that lose. You will, but they will lose the same amount as every other trade. And that amount, by design, is small enough that your emotional state can absorb it without going into survival mode. The third habit is about the most important question you can ask yourself at the end of every trading day. Not how much did I make or lose, not how good were my setups, not whether the market behaved as expected. The question is, did I follow my rules? Every single one of them, on every single trade, yes or no? And if the answer is no, which rule did I break, and what was I feeling at the moment I broke it? This is the post-trade process review, not a review of results, a review of behavior, because behavior is what you control, and behavior is what compounds either in the direction of consistency or in the direction of chaos. A trader who follows their rules and loses money is a successful trader in the only sense that matters. In the short term, they have preserved the integrity of their edge. A trader who breaks their rules and makes money has been rewarded for bad behavior, which is perhaps the most dangerous outcome in all of trading because it teaches them that rule breaking is sometimes okay, and that lesson always presents its bill eventually. What the post-trade process review does, practiced consistently over weeks and months, is gradually shift what your brain registers as a win. At first, your brain experiences a win as a profitable trade and a loss as an unprofitable one. The process review interrupts that wiring. When you consistently grade your trades on behavior rather than outcome, your brain begins to experience rule adherence as rewarding and rule deviation as costly regardless of what the profit and loss shows. This rewiring is slow, it is not dramatic, but it is the foundation of the kind of automatic discipline that makes consistent trading possible. The traders who seem effortlessly disciplined are not more willful than you. They have simply practiced long enough that the right behavior feels better than the wrong one. The process review is how you build that. The fourth and final habit is the simplest and the one most traders resist most fiercely. After any significant loss, after the kind of loss that stings, that activates, that makes you want to do something immediately to recover, do nothing for 24 hours. Not 24 hours of anguished waiting, not 24 hours of watching charts and telling yourself you're not trading, but genuinely stepping away from the platform entirely for one full day. The 24-hour rule for revenge. Because revenge trading, the impulse to immediately re-enter the market after a painful loss to recover what you lost, is almost never actually about recovery. It is about soothing the emotional activation as quickly as possible. It is the survivor trying to resolve discomfort through action, and the market is entirely indifferent to your need for resolution. It will not give you back what you lost just because you need it badly. What 24 hours does is give cortisol time to clear. The science here is well established. Elevated cortisol significantly impairs prefrontal cortex function, which is the part of your brain responsible for rule following, long-term thinking, and impulse control. Directly after a significant loss, your executive function is genuinely impaired, not metaphorically, not as an excuse, neurologically impaired. The decisions you make in that state are not your best decisions. They are your most reactive ones. 24 hours allows your neurochemistry to return to baseline. It allows the analyst back into the room before the survivor has done any more damage. It is not a punishment. It is not an admission of weakness. It is a respect for biology, an acknowledgement that your best self makes better decisions than your activated self, and your best self needs time to return after a significant loss. These four habits, the hard stop, the fixed position size, the process review, the 24-hour rule work together as a system. They are designed to interrupt the cascade at 4 different points. The hard stop catches it before it can become catastrophic. The fixed sizing prevents any single loss from being large enough to trigger full activation. The process review rewires what your brain values over time. And the 24-hour rule ensures that your most reactive moments never become your most consequential ones. No single habit is sufficient alone. All 4 together create something close to a structural impossibility of the kind of account destruction that most traders experience at least once in their careers. I don't trade to prove something. I trade to express something. A process I trust. A system I've built. A version of myself I've chosen to become. That is the mantra. Write it down somewhere, you'll see it. Because the version of you that chose these 4 habits, that wrote the number on the card before the session, that committed to fixed sizing and the process review and the 24-hour rule, that version of you is the one worth becoming. Not the version that trades on impulse and instinct and the desperate need to recover. Not the version that has blown accounts and carried the weight of them. But the version that shows up with a card on the monitor and the discipline to honor what's written on it. Mark Douglas didn't discover these habits in a vacuum. He built them from patterns he observed in thousands of traders, patterns he lived through himself. He knew what losing accounts felt like from the inside. He knew the cascade, he knew the rationalizations, and he dedicated his life to giving traders the tools to interrupt it. The 4 habits are those tools. They are not glamorous. They will not make you feel like a brilliant analyst or a disciplined warrior. They will just make it nearly impossible to blow an account. And in a business where blowing an account is the single most common cause of failure, nearly impossible is the closest thing to a guarantee that trading psychology has to offer. If this landed today, if something in the structure of these habits gives you a sense of solid ground in a place that has often felt unstable, then consider subscribing, not for the views, but as a quiet commitment to the trader you're in the process of becoming. That trader deserves the support, and that's the only reason it's worth mentioning. I want to go back to the cascade for a moment, because I don't think I fully honored how insidious it is. Most traders who have blown accounts can, in hindsight, identify the exact moment things shifted. There's usually a specific trade, a specific loss that was the hinge point. Before that loss, they were executing reasonably well. After it, something changed. The decisions that followed had a different quality. Faster, more reactive, less anchored to the rules they had started the day with. And what happened at that hinge point was not a failure of knowledge or even of discipline in the conventional sense. What happened was a neurological state change. The brain moved from a mode of deliberate, rule-based processing into a mode of threat response. And once that shift happens, the trades that follow are not really trading decisions at all. They are survival responses, wearing the costume of trading decisions. The 4 habits are each, in their own way, a mechanism for preventing or interrupting that state change. The hard stop prevents the losses from accumulating to the level that triggers it. The fixed position sizing prevents any single loss from being severe enough to push you over the threshold. The process review builds, over time, a psychological structure that is more resilient to setbacks because it defines success differently in terms of behavior rather than outcome, which means a loss, however painful, does not constitute a failure of your identity. And the 24-hour rule ensures that even when the state change occurs, even when you cross the threshold and the survivor takes over, the platform is closed before the survivor can do the kind of damage that takes months to recover from. The elegance of the system is that it does not require you to be perfect. It does not require you to have no emotional reactions. It does not require you to be fearless or robotic or detached from the real human experience of winning and losing money. It requires only that the habits are in place before you need them, that the number is written on the paper before the session, that the position size is calculated before the entry, that the process review happens after the trade, that the platform is closed before the impulse to revenge trade can act. The habits don't demand that you be a different person. They create conditions under which the person you already are can make better decisions. And this, I think, is what Mark Douglas understood about human psychology more deeply than almost any other writer or teacher in the trading world. He didn't believe that traders needed to become perfect psychological specimens. He believed they needed better environments, internal environments, structured by habits and practices and written commitments that allowed their natural intelligence and discipline to operate without being constantly derailed by their equally natural fear and desire. The trader who blew 3 accounts was not less disciplined or less intelligent than the trader who didn't blow accounts. He simply didn't have the structures in place that would have allowed his discipline and intelligence to stay online when conditions got hard. The index card gave him those structures. And the index card is available to everyone. One more thing, and then we're done. There is a version of these 4 habits that traders implement technically but not spiritually. They write the number, but they think of it as an annoyance rather than a gift. They maintain the fixed position size, but they resent the constraint every time a big setup appears. They do the process review, but they rush through it and don't really sit with the question. They observe the 24-hour rule, but they spend the 24 hours staring at charts and telling themselves they're not trading. If you implement the habits with that energy grudgingly, mechanically, under protest, they will help you somewhat. They will provide some structural protection, but they will not do what they did for the trader with the index card. They will not become part of who you are as a trader. The deeper implementation is when the habits become expressions of a belief rather than a compliance with a rule. When you write the number in the morning, not because you're supposed to, but because you genuinely believe that your calm morning self is wiser than your activated afternoon self and deserves to have the last word. When you size the position at 1%, not because it's the rule, but because you genuinely understand that certainty is an illusion and that sizing up on sure things is one of the great lies the trading mind tells itself. When you do the process review not to check a box, but because you are genuinely curious about who you are under pressure and you want the data. When you observe the 24-hour rule not as a punishment but as an act of self-respect, a recognition that your best decisions come from your best state, and your best state needs time to return after a hard loss. At that level, the habits are not separate from your trading psychology. They are your trading psychology, made behavioral and concrete and durable. They are what it looks like to take everything Mark Douglas taught and turn it into something you actually do rather than something you only know. And in trading, as in life, what you do is always what counts.